Tonight, the Gulf War and its aftermath for Black America. 30% of the U.S. ground forces were African Americans. And it was General Colin Powell's military doctrine that guided the success of the operation.
First, we're going to cut it off, and then we're going to kill it.
No black human being in America has ever exercised as much power as Colin Powell does.
Now, don't show me a Joe Louis, a Colin Powell, when mothers can't feed their children.
Law professor Charles Ogletree examines the issues of war, peace, and race at a church meeting in Philadelphia.
We have a war to fight on drugs. We have a war to fight on poverty. Every time a bomb dropped, every time everybody read, yeah, there was another bomb, another Nintendo game, it cost you, the taxpayers.
Tonight on Frontline, Black America's War.
Once lost disciples, now found, bound together forever. As I embellish, mentally I nourish, resuscitate a mind state that has perished. We shall inherit his blood and require back to earth. We rise out of spiritual darkness, 6,000-year curse. The lost disciples bound to the midst of the bottomless pit, trapped behind the gates of the wicked wilderness. I hear the sounds of the trumpets blowing across the heavens. It's calm, prepare for the storm of the sevens. Shabazz, the disciple, the holy exalter, condemning those who sacrificing babies on the altar. I hear the cries of innocent black babies who are aborted and unmercifully slaughtered. Loud screams echo, skulls of angry slaves turning over in their graves. The white sheets are like white flags. You need to wave it to the soldier of the Lord, the warrior King David. I come to kill and crucify those who trick and lie in the eyes of the Most High. The pale-faced devil race caucasoid germ, grafted from original black man's sperm. Thin-blooded, weak, grafted brain punk. Your power's a third of mine, you drunk, funky skunk. How dare you use Jesus' name to shield your filthy religion? My tongue be the sword to slash you with precision. The justice system is his, the court will only acquit him. And 85% of y'all are going to hell with him. The walls of hell are closing in. Disciples, we rose again. The sons of man, chosen men, like lightning striking from the east. The holy psychiatrist, fourth disciple, and killer priest. Unlimited votes of energy, striking the enemy in the righteous vicinity. Death be a penalty.
So come on, let's swing it low, sweet chariot. Pick up the righteous load, and yo, and carry it to a new home and identity. For my people, so death will be the penalty. And for my folks, I got bad love. Keep your eyes on the prize and your rise up. Hey, yo, Shabazz, make sure you sing it loud enough. Listen out to the right, to stay rugged and rough. And y'all get on down. Come on now, get on down. Swing it low, sweet chariot. Get on down. Come on now, get on down. Swing it low, sweet chariot.
The mighty man of war draw near, sharpen your sword. We must be aware of trick knowledge them used to deceive us. You've been plagued with them into the Jesus. You worship false portraits of Jesus. The grafted image you worship is Jesus. I hear the snap of my great-great-grandfather's neck and a noose hanging from a fucking tree, whipped and mentally abused. Visions of great-great-cousins running across the field, unarmed, ran down and killed. I be the star to dispel the darkness cast upon your soul by inhabitants of Mount Caucasus who praise the dead and not the true and living. Killed Jesus and said that he died for their religion.
So come on and swing it low, sweet chariot. Pick up your righteous load, and yo, and carry it to a new home and identity. For my people, song, death will be the penalty. And for my folks, I got bad love. Keep your eyes on the prize and your rise above. And yo, Shabazz, make sure you sing it loud enough. Reaching out to the right to stay rugged and rough. And y'all get up and down. Come on now, get up and down. Swing it low, sweet chariot. Get up and down. Come on now, get up and down. Swing it low, sweet chariot.
Swing it low down, swing it low down, swing it low down, swing it low down, swing it low down. Pick up the righteous load and yo, and carry it.
In 1917, as America entered the First World War, the great writer W.E.B. Du Bois made a public plea to the Negro community. Let us, quote, forget our special grievances and close ranks, he wrote. If the black man could fight to defeat the Kaiser, he could later present a bill for payment due to a grateful white America.
Du Bois clearly believed it, and he encouraged blacks to sign up for that war. He was doubly disillusioned, therefore, when young black soldiers returning from France were lynched, still wearing the uniform of their country.
In the past 3 weeks, still wearing the uniform of their country, black soldiers, along with whites, returned from the Persian Gulf to a tumultuous welcome. Never before in the history of this country were blacks so prominent in the front lines of war. And never before did blacks at home fight so hard to stop the war. No other group of Americans had as much to gain or to lose. For African Americans, what will be the legacy of the Persian Gulf War? This past week, at the Berean Presbyterian Church, one of the oldest and most historic inner-city churches of Philadelphia, there was a town hall gathering.
Don't you ever tell a young person, especially not my children, not to be all that they can be. Whether it's in the military or wherever, the consequences of life and the reality of it is, if you are part of a nation, I don't care what color the people are, you face the aggressor. If you're a part of that nation, when that nation go to war, you go.
Be all you can be? What can you be when you have a government that has misplaced priorities like that? Right. You cannot be anything. You cannot be anything in this country. And
you've got to be a person who respects where you are and what you are.
And what we're doing.
Citizens talked and argued among themselves, and with a panel that included the Reverend Jesse Jackson.
One should not get the impression that somehow our patriotism is up for discussion. It is the way that we have been dealt that's up for discussion.
Columnist Hodding Carter was there.
I'm sorry that there was this falling apart on racial lines as this war progressed. I'm sorry because in many, many ways, the way black Americans have made their way through the military today and the way the military functions ought to be exactly what ought to be demanded of the society at large.
The first black general in the U.S. Marine Corps, Frank Peterson.
When I came home from Korea, I thought, now I'm really a part of the mainstream. Wasn't there. I came home from Vietnam, now I'm part of the mainstream. Wasn't there, and not only wasn't there, I had to fight my way out of the airport literally just to get to my car because I was in uniform. Now you have those kids coming home from the Persian Gulf.
And the writer for New York Magazine, Joe Klein.
No, wait a second. Now I want you to listen to me, because for 20 years in this country, we haven't been talking to each other. We haven't been talking to each other since the late 60s. We, whites and blacks, for 20 years, the political reality in this country, and you know it very well, Reverend Jackson.
The evening was moderated by Charles Ogletree, professor of law at Harvard University.
Now, we're going to start this actual presentation with a film clip. I ask you to watch this very carefully. Then I'm going to come back and talk to the audience to get your responses as well.
It is ugly but true. Outsiders bind themselves to this country by the shedding of their blood. The conflict in the Persian Gulf revived one of the most sensitive arguments in African American life, especially among its leaders. What are the stakes for blacks when this country goes to war? Reaching back to Frederick Douglass and Du Bois, Black activists have a long history of supporting America's wars. In World War II, the slogan among black troops was the double V: victory abroad, victory at home. Still in segregated units, blacks agitated for the chance to fight, in the hopes of being repaid with better lives at home.
Everybody supported the war at that time, World War II. Blacks were urging the government to put them in combat services.
Vietnam marked a turning point. The front lines were nicknamed Soulville because blacks were so numerous. Black troops were bitter, and racial tensions ran high.
You found that your units, your actual grunt units, your frontline companies, platoons, were predominantly black or minority. So you wind up essentially as a rifleman. You're a grunt. You're on the ground, you're in the dirt. That's where they wound up. They were the troops who were actually doing the fighting.
This is the old Thomas Edison High School in inner-city Philadelphia. 54 of its students were killed in Vietnam, more deaths than any other high school in the country. Today, blacks make up almost 30% of Army troops. Last fall, as America steeled itself for a long ground campaign, it was anticipated that about a quarter of all casualties would be black.
Blacks all over the country knew people who had gone into the reserves in order to augment meager incomes. And the idea of preserving the Kuwaiti way of life, or protecting the Saudis and protecting their way of life, is a very hard sell for people who have a hard time keeping a kid in a public school.
Meanwhile, America's upper classes were almost entirely absent from the Gulf. Lower Marion High School, in a suburban neighborhood, just a few miles from Thomas Edison. The armed forces come here looking for recruits, but in schools like this one, they find few takers.
I think it's really aimed at people who have a lot less money around than we do. A recruiter from a good college could get 10 to 20 or more people. But a recruiter from the military might get 5 and about 2 who really want to know about it, and the other 3 went as a spoof.
As a spoof?
Yeah, it's really considered sort of a joke.
Have you ever thought about serving your country? The military is not a part of doing what they want to do. They're not going to sign up and go. They know that those battlefields, you can die, and they're not about to. They have a future that they've planned on Wall Street and other places, and it does not include the armed services. That's why they're very, very happy to brag about, quote unquote, the all-volunteer army. Those guys volunteered, they say, but they never take into consideration that the reason why they volunteered is because they had no place else to go.
The disengagement of the rich, the growing divide between black and white. The arguments seemed a metaphor for what this country had become in the 1980s. One writer, looking at how differently the war was perceived by whites and blacks, dubbed it the Reagan-Bush gap. But if many fault white leadership, black leaders too have come under fire.
What do we want? Peace! When do we want?
Ever since Vietnam, the civil rights and peace movements have been closely tied.
The prospect of war in the Persian Gulf has brought anguish to the residents of your host city.
Prominent black leaders were all but unanimous in opposing the Gulf War.
I think most of those so-called black leaders, and I say so-called because we're one of the few races on earth that must have a leader designated by color. I can say that an anomaly. But I think most of those were motivated by political desires and misreading what their constituencies were really all about. I think also now that the war is over, many of them are with egg on face.
We are talking life and death, war and peace. And it's
For much of the war, polls showed that about 50% of blacks supported it. But all the members of the Black Congressional Caucus, except one, voted against the use of force. The Reverend Jesse Jackson traveled to Baghdad to meet Hussein. He came back with a television interview of the Iraqi leader and a group of freed hostages.
Saddam Hussein was interested in trying to divide American public opinion along racial lines, so Jackson comes back with this and doesn't quite get the reception he anticipated. In fact, complains that the media doesn't give him more celebrity status for bringing back some hostages, because I think he failed to see that he was being used there by Saddam Hussein in a propaganda war.
Jackson later met with the Iraqi ambassador to the UN. With him was the Reverend Herbert Daughtry, who had earlier declared that George Bush, not Hussein, was the invader. The United States, Daughtry had said, was the greater monster. As the deadline for war grew near, black Muslim leader Louis Farrakhan flew to Baghdad to express his sympathy with the Iraqi leader. Farrakhan also tried to persuade Saudi leaders to expel American troops from their soil.
And I don't think blacks should look at this issue through a racial prism only. It invites a political isolation that is even greater than the political isolation that we now suffer. But we can't, on the other hand, we can't just leave out the racial aspect.
The long-term legacy for black Americans should be pride. I mean, this was a case where African Americans played a very major role in the operation from beginning to end, from top to bottom. It was enormously successful. Something actually worked. You realize how long it's been since that's happened in this country?
If history is any guide, black soldiers are coming back to this country with new confidence, unwilling to settle for the lives they had before. They have fought the war abroad, and now they're home. What war they'll fight next remains to be seen.
We have a young man here in the audience who's in the military, I believe. Sir, you wanted to respond?
I talked to Lieutenant Mr. Klein. My brother's in the Gulf, and the day before he shipped out, I drove down to Stuttgart, Germany, to speak with him and to speak to the people that were shipping out with him. And pertaining to your saying that people are not mercenaries, many of the African Americans were very concerned with their role in the Gulf and that they were going to fight on other dark-skinned people, and that America made no effort to free South Africa or free the Palestinians. So there's a deep concern amongst the African Americans, the ones I've seen. I can't speak for all.
Well, before you leave, you're saying your brother, as willing as he was to go to the Persian Gulf, he was still had other important issues that he thought should be addressed, like sanctions.
He was not willing.
He was not willing?
He was not willing.
Well, it's a volunteer army.
Yes, it is.
So what did he volunteer to do?
He volunteered because the alternative.
Oh, wait, excuse me. Because of the alternative, why don't you? The
military allows you an alternative. Being from the inner city, there's certain other things that are available to you. You have sometimes the drug trade, and if you don't want to get involved with that, higher education has been taken away from us during the Reagan/Bush administration. So you can do the underground, or you can join the military. Okay. So many African Americans choose the military.
Anyone else who says no? Anyone else who says no? We should not go. Sir?
Well, as a matter of fact, I was involved in a program here in Philadelphia where we were trying to counsel and advise blacks not to choose the military as a way out. But the thing about it is that our situation has not changed since slavery. When we were slaves, we had to work as slaves if we wanted to live or survive.
Well, what about you've got a General Peterson who joined decades ago, rolls up through the ranks, has been the first African American to be a general in the Marine Corps. Aren't you doing a disservice to his commitment and his loyalty to say, don't go?
Why he goes is his business. All I'm saying, does he know why he is going and who he is serving?
We'll ask
he
him.
is not serving us by going.
General Peterson? There are two issues there. I mean, whether to go and why to go, but one of your objectives was fighting discrimination in the military, and that you overcame that. What about this attitude?
Let me just preface any statement I might make by saying that I've never been confused. That's not one of my traits. I went because of a personal commitment to serve my country and myself. And for those of you who say that blacks should not go into the military, I would balance that against your alternative that you would offer them, which is zero.
All right. We actually have some.
I belong to an organization that says if your country is in trouble, regardless of who you are, red, white, green, or black, you support it. You go with it. Because I have no other country to go to. If you can tell me another country where I could be free to stand up here and say that, then I'll gladly go.
So
and those who want to go,
people who are opposed to it, so you disagree
I am
with
against those who are opposed to it.
Even our leaders?
Because now you have a cause to say, I want this. Because I went out there and fought for it, now I want this.
Yes, this man right here.
I'm a Vietnam veteran. My attitude from Vietnam, I served, I paid for it with my own blood. I should get the best that America has to offer, bar none. And that's what doesn't work.
And what about your attitude in terms of what black leaders had to say about this war?
I thought that they missed a political opportunity. However, I believe, just like the Palestinians never miss a chance to miss a chance, that sometimes black leaders blow opportunities because of the rigidity of their mindset.
So when black political leaders stood up to oppose the use of armed force when we started that, you disagreed. You didn't think they were.
I understood what they said, and I agreed in what they were saying, but I thought that there was a point that they had to become more political, even in light of the successes and the feelings of the black community, of the black troops themselves. They felt good about what they were doing. They felt proud. And over here, there was a division, even in their own ranks. I thought black leaders should have been more political.
Reverend Jackson, Saddam Hussein has been called a terrorist, a madman. He invaded a sovereign state. He used weapons that threatened the lives of many sovereign countries. And yet we see the reaction in America. 80% of white Americans enthusiastically supported our decision to go into the war. And yet, not more than 50% of African Americans, and at one time, only 20%, and more importantly, you have been witnessing 8 years of Reaganism in the White House and 2 years of Bush's domestic policies in the White House. Is there any correlation between the low amount of African American support for the war and what you've witnessed in the last 10 years in Republican administration?
There's no question that you have a large number of people who I can only think of as those who've been dealt out, who look at a government which has systematically spent 10 years failing to address or even systematically attacking the root of the ways at getting at their problems first. And then you say, and now I'm supposed to trust these guys when they say this war, diverting this much money, is a good thing. And you look back and you say, now these are the same fellows who have been sitting there spending a great part of their time quite overtly appealing to people who don't have my interests at heart, and then they're turning around and saying, but this war is a really good thing. I don't think you have to go much deeper than that to understand the roots of a great deal of the disagreement. Now, I like the applause, and the last applause I'll get tonight. I happen to disagree with that. I mean, this was something, in the end, I, as an old anti-war guy, felt was the right war at the right time. But on the other hand, I'm one of society's beneficiaries these days. Okay. I'm not one of the guys who has been really, in effect, screwed over the last 10 years.
A number of black political leaders expressed opposition to that war. Let me ask you this in terms of your perspective and what could have been done and what should be done. What's your reaction to, as you call them, so-called black leaders standing up in opposition to the war once this country was committed to going?
Well, if they're going to stand up and for opposition to the war and be very vehement and vocal about it, they should do the same with those conditions that exist prior to those troops going into the military.
Well, Reverend Jackson did that. What about the idea? Minister Farrakhan talked about embracing Saddam Hussein. Reverend Jackson went over and brought some hostages back. Do you think they should have done that?
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think in this country, you're allowed to do anything that is not essentially illegal. And if that's one of the methods of getting your point across or your message across, that's fine.
Reverend Jackson?
I want to say this is important. It's not fair.
All right.
It's not fair. It's not a fair correlation. I confronted Saddam Hussein and challenged him to leave Kuwait and urged him to release Americans and others held hostage and brought them back home. But I further challenged, not only was he wrong for being in Kuwait, if we're going to embrace the principle of self-determination, it must apply to Iraq. It must also apply in West Bank, Lebanon, Panama, Grenada, Angola, and South Africa as well.
Broad the issue.
It must apply, we must apply across the board. So it is fair to distinguish what my mission was, and I felt good about bringing Americans back home.
Mr. Klein, on the issue of black leadership here, Juan Williams, in that piece that you saw, was critical of Reverend Jackson's mission to the Persian Gulf, and in fact said that that was a way of dividing the black community in some sense, and creating a racial issue in this country.
Well, I think that there are two different issues here. One is the issue of diplomatic freelancing and who sent Reverend Jackson. I feel uncomfortable about your trip on two levels. One, as a journalist, I think that mixing journalism and diplomacy is kind of off the board, which you were doing there. And secondly, I think that there's a possibility in the case of freelance diplomacy of sending mixed messages. I think that Saddam Hussein was getting that very message that you delivered to him from President Bush, from Secretary of State Baker. I'd like to ask you what you think you're delivering that message, what difference it made that you personally delivered that message.
I was there as a TV host, but also there concerned about trying to help break that cycle where communications had broken down, in fact, and making an appeal directed to him and a challenge to come out of Kuwait. That was within policy.
But what prevents, Louis Farrakhan was there, and Ramsey Clark was there, Jim and Tammy Baker could have gone there. What prevents everybody from going? What prevents anybody who wants to get a little press from going over there?
Nothing prevents them except maybe courage or conviction.
Or the money for the plane ticket.
I don't know what prevents them.
All right, we got to take another couple comments right here.
Why jump on Reverend Jackson when he was going to bring back Goodman, and when he went to bring back some people who needed to come back because they were sick, Hussein? Why jump on him when he brought people back from Cuba? I would to God there were thousands of other Jesse Jacksons.
There are some military recruiters here. I believe there's a gentleman here. Sir, one of your responsibilities is try to encourage people to serve in the military. And I'd like to hear your response to some of these views that black Americans maybe shouldn't join and maybe shouldn't be fighting these wars.
Well, personally, I think that we offer opportunities to everyone. And if they choose to accept those opportunities, that's great. We don't discriminate on racial lines at all.
Well, does it trouble you that, not following orders, but the view here by some people, that maybe blacks should not be involved in the military, maybe they should not be fighting?
No, I believe it's their right to express that opinion. I don't have any problem with that. Again, as Reverend Jackson stated, I don't feel any problem with people not supporting the conflict. That's what we're fighting for. That's what the military is there for, to support their right to express their opinion.
Reverend Jackson?
I want to say this is important because this issue, it's so finely cut. We have earned our rights with our blood. The veterans of World War I and II and Korea laid the predicate for Dr. King and Rosa Parks. It's never been that far apart in that sense. Part of our problem is that tonight, outside of the streets here in Philadelphia, where we are tonight, Kuwait looks worse than the inner city of Philadelphia tonight. But 2 years from now, Kuwait will be rebuilt and inner city of Philadelphia will be 2 years worse off. That's a part of our problem. That that the risk-reward ratio is off here. Just last week, the brother raised such a profound question. As our troops are coming back home, hugging wives and babies, looking for a job in the middle of an economic recession, the ambassador of Kuwait took a plane load of business people to Kuwait for a $100 billion 5-year plan for 500,000 people. The troops who fought in the war should have the first cut on the redevelopment of Kuwait. It's like there is no equation where reward and risk ever comes together. Okay. It's not so much for or against war, it really comes down to reward and risk. And for us, it's high risk and low reward. And that's part of the agony that you feel here.
Okay. Now I'm going to talk a little bit, we're going to talk about reward and risk as Reverend Jackson has characterized it. And we want to talk about that reward and risk in terms of General Colin Powell, who, as you know, based on his role in the Persian Gulf, was the most powerful African American in this country, and perhaps one of the most powerful in this country's history, given the power that he had to make decisions. We're going to have a short videotape production about General Powell, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and African American. And we're going to talk about General Powell's role in the war and his role as a leader in this country.
As a measure of effectiveness of how we're doing in the air campaign, I just pull these two things out. I've laundered them so you can't really tell what I'm talking about because I don't want the Iraqis to know what I'm talking about. But trust me, trust me.
The most sensitive decisions of war and peace. The trusted inner circle of men. And for the first time ever, a black man among them.
I feel about Colin Powell much the same way I felt about Jackie Robinson. This man is a pioneer. There has never, in the history of America, been a more powerful black human being. Ever. No black human being in America has ever exercised as much power as Colin Powell has.
Our strategy to go after this army is very, very simple. First, we're going to cut it off, and then we're going to kill it.
Colin Powell poses a dilemma to other black leaders. He is a symbol of black pride, and he is also the most hawkish chairman of the Joint Chiefs since the days of Vietnam.
It's not just the established black leadership, but it's also the Democratic Party that would have problems conceptually with Colin Powell. You know, on the one hand, he's an African American. On the other hand, he's a general. That makes him both a victim and an imperialist. It's, you know, cognitive dissonance. How can you be both?
Colin Powell has moved between two worlds, the White House of Reagan and Bush and the network of black organizations around the country. These two worlds have been at odds for much of the past 10 years. What does Colin Powell really stand for? And what will his rise to power mean for other black Americans? Colin Powell was born at the fringes of Harlem. Like many young men from working-class homes, he enlisted in the ROTC, drawn to the military in part for the fringe benefits it offered. That was more than 30 years ago. Now reporters comb through his past, looking for clues.
You know, in 1952, when Dwight Eisenhower accepted the Republican nomination, a close friend of his said, Democrats were after you to accept it in 1948, and this year, why weren't you a Democrat? And Eisenhower said, well, look, I grew up in Abilene, Kansas. I never knew Democrats. What are Democrats? Colin Powell grew up in Washington Heights in New York. He went to City College in New York. He speaks a little Yiddish. I don't think he probably met very many Republicans. He may well be a Democrat.
The last time anyone could fix a political identity on Powell was in 1964, when his Volkswagen had a Johnson for President sticker on it. By then, he'd served a tour in Vietnam, while his family waited in Birmingham, Alabama. These were the days of Bull Connor and the famous police dogs.
It really got to him that his family, while he was fighting for his country,
his wife and his small child and her parents had to live in such fear of the police in Birmingham. And I think that really left a mark on him.
Unlike many black leaders, Powell watched the civil rights movement from afar. After his second Vietnam tour, he caught the attention of Frank Carlucci and Caspar Weinberger, two powerful Republican appointees. Weinberger, as Secretary of Defense, presided over the great military buildup of the early 80s. Domestic programs were being cut. Civil rights leaders protested loudly. Powell remained loyal to Weinberger and Reagan. They, in turn, were loyal to him.
General Powell is a very smooth operator. He's got a lot of style, he's got a lot of tact, and he has moved easily in jobs which allow him to mix and mingle with the high and mighty. He is a very smooth customer.
Powell maintained close personal ties with black organizations and many black leaders, even as he climbed rapidly through the White House.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I am most pleased to introduce the man that I have selected to be the next chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Colin L. Powell.
This man would go on to orchestrate in the Persian Gulf one of the most punishing bombing campaigns ever unleashed on this planet. Iraqi casualties are estimated at 100,000 or more. Yet few have chosen to criticize Powell for that. He emerged from Desert Storm with the nickname the Black Eisenhower, and Republicans and Democrats, liberals and conservatives, whites and blacks, all are rushing to claim him as their own.
Really proud of everything you're doing. Hey, get him on camera. You don't need me on camera. Take all you can. Have you ever seen anything like this before in your life? Come on, let's go here. Wait, get your finger over the lens, son. There you go.
Thank you.
America loves black heroes. We love black exceptionalism. America loves to have black heroes because it tells America that we're fair and that the doors are open. And for those people who want to believe that the doors are open and we have a level playing field, you can look at Colin Powell and Michael Jordan and as Exhibit A and say, well, you see those people in the ghettos, if they just pull up their socks and stop going to bed at the age of 15, they too would be fine.
He's not a Jesse Jackson. He's not someone who challenges whites and challenges the white power structure or their values. The truth is, Colin Powell validates the white power structure and their values because he has played by their rules and has succeeded and says others should play by the rules too.
I'm the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and I represent every GI who wears our uniform. But I'm also black and African American. My path was different. My path was more difficult. Many interviewers, when they come to talk to me, think they're being progressive by not mentioning in their stories any longer that I'm black. And I tell them, don't stop now. I shot somebody, you'd have mentioned it. 53 years you've been saying it, don't stop now.
He can go into politics, he can go into corporate boardrooms. The truth of the matter is, I think Colin Powell can do whatever the hell he wants to. I think the world is his oyster. He can eat it, he can fry it, he can do anything he wants to.
If Powell ever enters the political world, if ever he declares a position on abortion or affirmative action, then this man who now seems to have no enemies except Saddam Hussein will find out that he has many. In the meantime, he remains a mystery. Not even his children, it is said, know his political views or party affiliation.
Reverend Jackson, what does General Colin Powell represent for Black America?
Well, at one level, to me, he represents a personal friend. On the other hand, he lives outside of the zone of certain criticism because he does not have to take positions where people do vote up or down. He is in the military arena. He administered the Panama War. He didn't make the decision. He administered the war in the Persian Gulf. Deciding to have the war was Mr. Bush's decision. He implements his job well.
You've seen a lot of press reports calling him an American hero, and a lot of reporters and journalists suggesting that he should consider a political career. What's your reaction to that?
Well, that's a choice he has to make. But
why is it happening, though? I'm wondering why. Why are they saying Colin Powell might be a good vice president candidate? He might be a candidate for a governor?
Well, there's a sense now that somebody, no, it's not, it's just that too. But it's also that
this is the same George Washington.
It's time for somebody black to make that breakthrough. And many whites are trying to choose who that will be. You see, and that's the trueness of that. He's qualified to be it. He has great favor within his own ethnic community and around the country. So he has earned these accolades. But being a war hero coming out of a popular war, he is. I think Roger Wilkins' point was this: he is an exception, and there are those who would use his exceptional status as a fig leaf to cover millions of others who do not have those opportunities.
All those things being said, there are several other things that also have to be said. I mean, the fact of the matter is he is a genuine hero. A general becoming a presidential boom figure is as old as this republic. And it's a good thing, frankly, that it now is extended out to be new for the republic, that it would be a black man who would be. Second thing is, this is not just a chairman of Joint Chiefs taking somebody's orders. This is the most powerful Joint Chief in the history of this country under a military reorganization which makes him an eminently powerful person in his own right, a man who, when he argued inside that four-person council, was heard and not responsive only. This guy had real power. Pocket it, folks. Whether you like the war or not, the man was a power player who had positions which carried the day inside that debate within that circle of President, Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense.
So, sir, you have a comment? You set up?
Black leaders have been attacking Colin Powell.
In what way?
You said he just administered. First of all, the Bush administration is on the line, and the Republicans to deliver to these people when they come back. No doubt about it. You said he only administered the war. Bill Gray, and I have a lot of respect for him, but he denigrated his own position and the Black Caucus by saying Colin Powell was not a policy maker, he was just a policy executor. That's saying that Colin Powell is a house nigga. And if they say that blacks shouldn't have been in the war, shouldn't go to the Gulf, and Colin Powell sends them, that's the house niggas sending the field niggas to die. That's what they said, and that's the anger that I have.
Well, that is an unfair characterization of his role. That's not Congressman Gray's position, and certainly it is not my position. In the final analysis, the commander-in-chief determines war and determines ceasefire. Everyone beneath that is an implementer and an inputter in that process. That's no denigration of Colin Powell.
Well, it's not fair. You're telling me a black cop can't arrest a black drug dealer. We got black police.
We'll get you in just a minute. We'll get right back to you, sir. We'll get to you.
People said, excuse me, Reverend Shepherd, people said the same thing when blacks wanted to get into the police force. They said it was racist. Blacks became police officers, and then they accused them because they had to fight black street crime. A black policeman can't fight black street crime. A black general can't send black soldiers over the war. I mean, it's crazy. I don't understand what you're telling us. You got problems going into corporate America, problems going into education system. We got problems everywhere, but we have made gains. Stop telling black people that they've done nothing, they've accomplished nothing. They have, and we need to move on from here. My point is...
Mr. Klein, is there a difference between Colin Powell and other black leaders?
I think that, other black leaders, you're generalizing. I think that
well,
as blacks...
Let's take Reverend Jackson, for example. Let me be specific.
I've heard him mentioned for president.
Here you are, you're a journalist. You've got two people. You've got Reverend Jackson, who's been in the political front for a long time. You've got Colin Powell, where the public and the press are saying this guy has great political potential. Are they different?
Are they different? Of course they're different. All right. I've seen Jesse Jackson in inner city high schools inspire kids the way I've never seen another American. But I haven't seen Jesse Jackson move 500,000 troops and a whole army over to the Middle East. So they have different skills. I mean, they're different human beings. What I was going to say before is this, that as blacks move more into the American mainstream, as they have and will continue to do, you're going to see a greater diversity of black leaders and differences among them. You're seeing Doug Wilder, you're seeing Mike Espy in Mississippi, you're seeing Gary Franks in Connecticut, you're seeing all kinds of different people.
Okay. Point is, our differences as human beings are self-evident because we have different parents, and different orientations. And there is no conflict between our position. Jesse Jackson as president and Colin Powell as chair of Joint Chiefs allows both of us to function compatibly.
We're going to take a couple of questions from the audience. Sir, you want to stand up? I wanted your sense. There's been a lot of talk in the press and the public about Colin Powell and his potential for leadership in this country. What's your perspective as a young student who has to make these critical decisions?
He's, coming out of this war as the architect of this masterful military operation, probably one of the most successful in modern history. And I think that brings with it positive implications as a role model for other black Americans.
What about white Americans?
For white Americans?
Yes.
In what respect?
Is he also a role model for white Americans?
I think he is too. I'm not saying that he's just specifically a role model for black Americans, but I'm saying maybe a new type of role model for black Americans, one whom is self-reliant and who, although worked with a system that placed many obstacles for blacks in the United States, has risen to gain significant power.
My point is, Reverend Shepherd, let me come to you.
So what I would like to say is, I get a little weary of this conversation about progress that we have made. How have we made progress when black people are in worse condition today than they have ever been in probably in the history of this nation since slavery? Now, don't show me a Joe Louis or Colin Powell when mothers can't feed their children. I don't want to see no more Jackie Robinson. And so about how we have achieved. We ain't achieved nothing until men and women, boys and girls have a rightful share for the blood that they've shed.
Wait. Mr. Carter? Wait. I'm coming to you. Mr. Carter?
Black America has not achieved yet, in large part because of white America, what black America should have as American citizens. That is a fact. But to say that no black Americans have achieved anything and that things are worse is simply wrong, and I cannot sit here and allow it. I'm sitting here, I'm sorry. It'd be very popular for me to go right like that to you, and it's dead wrong. Dead wrong.
You get a response. Let me finish his point.
Dead wrong.
Talking about achievement.
I am sitting.
Role models of people who.
I'm sitting here next to two people who demonstrate to me by their presence that you're wrong. There is accomplishment for some. There is desperation for many. But pocket the accomplishment. Don't denigrate it, because it is on the back of accomplishment that you have a chance to deal with desperation.
Mr. Klein.
I was not denigrating. I was showing how it was used as a symbol. And every time things get worse and worse in our communities, somebody brings me a Joe Louis, a Colin Powell. I know what Colin Powell has had to go through. There's General Peterson. In the corporate area, there's not one CEO in the top 250 corporation who is black in this nation. Please, when we are on the verge of almost a total destruction of our community, to talk about progress is almost insulting of one or two individuals. Or even 10 or less.
Clearly, more has to be done. There's no question about that. But I have a real serious concern here with the sort of things that that gentleman was just saying, and it is this. It is the exact opposite message that I've heard Jesse Jackson deliver in high schools across this country. The message you're sending to black children is that white racism is insuperable. You can't overcome it. You can't triumph. Things are worse than they ever were. That is inaccurate, and it sends a message, and it sends a message to children that it doesn't make a difference if you try, and that is the exact wrong message.
As I listen to him argue his case, and two journalists speak right past him, it says so much why there's so much hostility toward the press, because it is so white, and it is so male, and it's shooting past us, and not hearing really what we have to say.
Mr. Carter?
I got it.
Mr. Carter.
I'm telling you, I wasn't going past anybody. I'm speaking directly to the issue that's raised here, and I'm going to say it one more time, because it is important that it be engaged directly and not pretend like we're ships passing in the night. We're not. We're engaging on this one. We live in a real world of political engagement, which you engage in all the time. It is all very well to make the speeches to the converted, okay? It's great to say over and over again those things which are clearly wrong. But if you're not able to at the same time pocket that which has been done, which is right, done by you, then I'm going to tell you what happens. Step by step in a political society, you lose the political possibilities inherent in your own success by denigrating everything that you've already done.
All right, I want to take, sir, right here. I want to get these two brothers next, all right? Yeah.
With all due respect, I'd like to say to the two journalists that you're not really qualified to speak about the condition or mindset of the African American, because you don't live in our communities. You see, you don't know what we feel and the pain that we feel. There's no way that you can. There's nothing against you not to say that you honestly want to feel that way or want to do something good, but you can't understand, where we're coming from. In terms of General Powell, in terms of whether he's a leader or not, to African Americans or to all Americans, African Americans, we need to choose our own leaders, and that's something that we will decide as a people who will be our leaders, not who white America chooses or who the media chooses. That's something that we would do for ourselves.
When you talk about white nominated leadership, absolutely no white should name any leader for any black community, period. But if you think there's going to be a leadership of this nation without white votes, you're crazy. Right. It's got to be put together, and it's going to have to be with two.
Your comment?
I think we're a little confused here. I don't think any of the black community objects to any American citizens, black, white, or any other color, going into the military services.
We've heard some objections.
Well, but this is our country, and we applaud General Peterson, we applaud General Powell, but that should not be the only area where our young people can look to realize their potential.
Mr. Klein?
I'm not so worried about the troops when they come home. I think if there's any resume line that is going to get you a job over the next 30 years in this country, it's I participated in Operation Desert Storm.
This is going to be different from every other war.
Yeah, in this case it is,
and
because
why?
it's a different army. It's a different structure.
As opposed to my distinguished colleague, I might say that I'm not optimistic that there will be openings. When you speak of jobs being available, those jobs were there before those kids went into service. What's changed? A war? No. The labor unions, the various companies, are they going to open their doors now that these kids have fought?
What's changed?
Why open the doors for a 5-day war when they weren't open for a 360-day war?
One final question here. And the question is, when the president spoke before a joint session of Congress, I didn't hear a concrete, well-defined, well-thought-out plan for this country. We had Desert Storm. The question is, what about Desert city street. If we don't get the domestic agenda that you're talking about, what happens the next time we're called? Should we go? No. Should we pause?
I think as far as a military member, that is our obligation. If we have signed the dotted line, we are committed. We feel we are committed. We went because there was an obligation. We signed to say that if America goes to war, that is our responsibility to respond.
I heard a couple of no's in the audience. Where are those no's? Is this a no right here?
Also, and please listen, I have a Powell in my pocket, a Jesse Jackson in my pocket, but I say if the president says there's another war, hell no, we won't go. Because in my pockets, I am not feeding my children. I'm not housing my people. I have no education and no jobs. Until the war is fought here at home, until billions of dollars is pumped here at home, I say we will not go to war. We will stand up against it.
Now, in case the press wants to play her position in a funny way, in the war, everybody got something out the deal. The Egyptians got their debt forgiven. The Syrians got debt forgiveness and got spoken to. Israel got more security and more support. The Kuwaitis get their country back. So the idea of expecting to get something out of the war is not an unreasonable expectation. And so when the question becomes, we go to war and we come back, what we get must not be put down as a less than valid concern. Everybody in the alliance got something out the deal. So those who are on the front line must expect to get at least their civil rights out of the deal. That's fair.
Mr. Klein?
Thank you very much.
Funding for Frontline is provided by the financial support of viewers like you and by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Frontline is produced for the Documentary Consortium by WGBH Boston, which is solely responsible for its content. For videocassette information about this program, please write to this address.
This is PBS. A year before Operation Desert Storm, the Pentagon tested its doctrine of overwhelming force in the invasion of Panama.
Burn, baby, burn.
But today, Panama is still plagued by charges of drug trafficking and money laundering.
As time goes on, people forget the Noriega regime and are more conscious of the problems created by the invasion.
War and Peace in Panama. Next time on Frontline.
For a printed transcript of this or any Frontline program, send $5 to Journal Graphics Incorporated, 267 Broadway, New York, 10007.